Thanks for tuning in to My Valley, His Victory, hosted by me, Mackenzie Smith, where I interview Christians who love the outdoors and have walked through valleys in their lives. In a world of highlight reels and surface-level relationships, we all have faced hardships. I believe our experiences can be encouraging to others if we have the courage to be vulnerable. 2 Corinthians 1 says, "The Father of compassion and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble with the comfort we ourselves receive from God." My goal is to inspire you to come to the Creator through His creation and connect you with Christians who have been through similar experiences. I pray that this podcast encourages you if you are in a valley and pushes you to share how God has turned your past valley into His victory. On today's episode of My Valley, His Victory, we have Diego Cano. He is also known as Diego Ventures. He is a Colombian American high school educator based in Central California. He serves with multiple nonprofits such as Bakersfield Angels, Under His Umbrella, and Yugo Ministries. When he is not at work or serving, Diego loves hiking, backpacking, and trail running all over Central and Southern California. He is an outdoor activities coordinator with Outdoor Adventures Plus, a California-based hiking club, with an emphasis on the Urban Youth Nature Project. In the early stages of his teaching career, Mr. Cano developed a passion for solo travel and has now traveled to over 40 countries. He enjoys recording his travel and outdoor journey on Instagram, looking to encourage others to get outside their comfort zone. Over the last 5 years, Diego has been more intentional about his walk with the Lord. Currently, he is a co-advisor at his school for several clubs: CFA, Christian Fellowship Athletes, Spartans with a Cause, Christian Club, and the Alpine Club. Thanks so much for being with us today, Diego.
Thank you, Mackenzie, for having me. I'm super grateful to be here. Super excited about the podcast, and just to share a little bit about my story. I get to listen to other episodes, and they're so hopeful. It's great just seeing other people with other walks kind of struggle with the same things we all have to deal with on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for listening and just for being here. I know I'm super excited about our conversation, but would love for our listeners just to get to know a little bit more about you. So I'd love for you to just share a little bit more about yourself and who you are.
All right. Absolutely. So I'll start with first, Colombian born. I came to the U.S. when I was 8 with my mom. My dad was already here for about 4 years, so we just came to reunite with him. I developed a passion for the outdoors at a very early age. When I was born in Colombia, we had a finca, a ranch in Colombia. I was up on a mountain. And so our long weekends, our holidays, we tended to drift out there in the 70s and 80s. I'm an 80s baby. And so there wasn't a lot of infrastructure there. There wasn't any bridges, anything like that. So I remember vividly crossing streams, almost rivers, to get up the hill. And it's probably about a 30 to 45-minute hike. And so we're talking about kids, we're talking about taking groceries up there. And then once you're on the mountain, you're on the mountain, and it was just family time. It was just let loose. There wasn't no, come in when the lights turn off on the streets. It was just, you kind of get to do whatever you want and enjoy horses, cows, all of the above. So I think that was a neat experience. And then, as we moved to Southern California, we transitioned from that kind of outdoors to the beach, to camping trips, things like that. I started playing sports, and then eventually, got into soccer, got into baseball. I ended up here in Central California, actually, because of soccer. I ended up playing soccer at CSUB. And that's pretty much it. As far as like religion, I would say I always grew up Catholic, and I really got to witness my grandmas both just dive into the Bible and both just really, really, really live out what I would say Jesus kind of did, and how he walked. I just saw that patience in them, that just calmness, that giving without expecting anything back. And then as a practicing Catholic, I didn't see my parents mimic that, and I didn't mimic that. And so finally, later down the road, I started kind of reflecting on, who do I want to grow up to be like? And that was my go-to. And so that's kind of where that tweak started in my walk with the Lord.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you said, you saw your grandparents, just be in love with the Lord and have this different walk than some other people that were around you. And you were like, I wonder what that's all about. And I need to dig in a little bit more to that. And so I think that's really special. And I think it's really cool that you went and played college soccer. That's fun. That's a fun fact that I did not know about you. And so that's very cool that that's kind of like what brought you to Central California. But it sounds like you loved it and you stayed and you're there now, have been there for a while. So you are really active with, it sounds like children kind of overall. You're involved with a youth, outdoor hiking group, nature project, and you also work in schools. And so would love for you to just share a little bit about like where your love for kids and, kind of maybe that piece came from.
For sure. So, growing up, I enjoyed kids and being around kids and whatnot. I don't have any kids of my own, but I do enjoy hanging with them and mentoring them. When I went to Cal State Bakersfield, I didn't have a career path in mind. I just knew I wanted to do something with kids, and so I started with child development, which later transitioned to child adolescent family studies. At one point, I wanted to be a teacher, but I ended up just sticking with the CAPS major. So when I finished at CSUB, I didn't have a game plan. I took a year off. I got to go back to Colombia for the first time since I'd been here when I was 8. So that was a culture shock. And so when I
Wow.
got back, I found myself in quite a bit of debt. I was out of college. I had some injuries that I had a biopsy in my foot. And so I found myself in a little medical bill debt, and so I ended up getting a second job as an instructional aide in a classroom. So when I got that job, I thought, oh, what I saw my my aides do in my high school were make copies, take roll, things like that, grade papers. I can do that. And when I got in there, it was more of like there was a kindergarten special ed class, and the kids just loved me from day one. The teacher was a very, very good teacher and a mentor, but she was very, very blunt. Like she told it out like it was. And so she went up to me one day and just said, "Hey, you actually have a lot of initiative, and you're not on your phone. And most IAs that we get are just on their phones nonstop. They have to be redirected. It's almost like having another child in the room." She's like, "Why don't you go back to school? You already have your bachelor's. Kids need a role model." And then she hit me with when I saw God just shine that light, where she said, "And you get summers off." And I said, "Oh, that actually doesn't sound too bad." So I went back to school. One of the other IAs was older. She could have been my mom, and she was kind of waiting for that right time to come along to go back to school. So we ended up enrolling in a credential program together. And yeah, the rest is history. I feel like God was little by little dragging me back into my path. And that was where little by little every door just started opening, from intern position for my first phase of student teaching to getting my first job as an educator in an elementary school, and then yeah, burning out and coming back 2 years later because I ended up moving to Colombia for a project and coming back. And yeah, now I've been at the high school for about 9 years, and started coaching. I've been coaching soccer the entire time I've been teaching, and this year was my first year without coaching soccer. So
Okay, very cool. I love it. I love that these little bricks just kind of got put in your path and you just kept walking on them. And I think it's really cool too that you're getting to coach soccer because obviously that was a big passion of yours for a long time. And so that's very cool. Very cool. So I know that it took us a little while to connect because you were bebopping all over the world. I feel like every time I messaged you, you were in a different country doing something. And you said in your bio that you have a passion for solo travel and have traveled to over 40 countries. So would love for you to just share with us a little bit about like what you do when you go on these travels. What is it that you find yourself getting into on these solo travels, and maybe sharing with us, some of your favorite places that you've been.
so when I started, I stayed in Bakersfield since I got my first job teaching. And I decided, well, I don't have a lot of family here. I don't have anything tying me down here. And Bakersfield is a cool place, but it's a cool place to raise a family, which I don't have. And therefore, I told myself, you know what? I'm going to work here, and I'm going to take off every break. I'm just going to take off and backpack. I've had multiple people mention how amazing backpacking was and how it allows you to dig deep and just be able to really find yourself. So I started. kind of backpacking. And I took off on my first backpacking trip. I think it was like 2009, and it was to Costa Rica. I had a girlfriend at the time. I called her and just said, "Hey, I booked some flights to Costa Rica for 14 days. We got to go buy backpacks." And that was that. And then once in Costa Rica, I met an Italian guy at the first hostel I ever stayed at, and he gave me some intentional words. He said, travel as much as you can while you're young, and when you are older, you can visit and spend as much time in your home country. So I said, "Oh, okay." He said that's what his grandma told him. So I said, "Those are very, very wise words." So I just continued to do that. It was just every trip, every break was another trip, and I would backpack. My trips have changed over time though. Now I'm doing more backpacking and also hiking trips since I've been connected with the outdoors a little bit more recently. I'd say in the last 5 years, whereas before it was more party and more along those things. So
Yeah, absolutely. So out of the 40 countries, which couple, I know it's always hard to pick a favorite, but like which couple stand out? Which ones just really like set your soul on fire?
I'd say one of what makes this selection, which is very difficult, I think, is the people you meet. So Vietnam would probably be up there. Turkey would probably be up there. And I would say Colombia. I don't want to be biased though, since I am Colombian, but Mexico has a part of my heart also. So,
Yeah. Very cool. Vietnam and Turkey are both for sure on my bucket list. I have always seen the like hot air balloons in Turkey, and I think that's very cool. And I'm like,
oh
I want
yeah,
to go experience that.
that was an amazing experience in Cappadocia.
Yes, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Hmm.
I don't know how often that happens or if that's even like a good representation of what Turkey is like, but that's what just sticks out in my mind.
It actually is. It is. It is. And it happens every day. And it's like 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning. They got tons and tons of hot air balloons going. They got that aspect of the tourism down. And so it's a little bit pricey, but it's worth it. Once you're there, you have to do it
Oh my gosh, this happens every day.
every day.
I thought it was like, we have in America, we have the Albuquerque Hot Air Balloon Festival that happens like once a year for a week. I thought it was like a very specific thing. But no, that's just Turkey.
I don't think they do it in the winter because I've seen all those hoodoos covered in snow, looking like kind of like Bryce Canyon. So I don't know if I've seen any hot air balloons in the
Mhm.
summer, but as long as the weather's good, I think they fly out.
Okay, very interesting. I learn something new every day. So, Diego, obviously going out and traveling and being in the outdoors is super fun, but I would love for you to share with us a little bit about how it plays a role specifically in your relationship with Christ.
Yeah, so it was through this like I would say renovation period of mine in like 2020ish. I kind of found myself needing change, and so I quit drinking and quit like going out to bars and things like that. And so I went, that was around COVID time. I ended up going on a little national park tour where couldn't fly out. So I figured, we got to go see what this country has to offer. So went to Yellowstone, went to a bunch of places. And so once I got back, I noticed a lot of positive changes happening in my life. And the more I've actually been in tune with God and I get out there now, it's almost like my time to talk to him, my time to hear what he has to say, and my time to just have that peace. Especially when I hike or trail run by myself, I can just sit on a rock to have a snack and just say, God, I'm so grateful for my lungs, my legs, for the endurance you've given me to get up here because there's nobody out here. And just things like that, where I get to be just very raw with God and just so appreciative of everything because it takes a car to get there. It takes gas money to get there. It takes time. It's just an abundance of things that come together for me to be able to be there, experiencing that moment. And he's the one that made it all happen. So that's kind of how it works out for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I That's a fresh perspective and I love it. There's a gratitude for being out there because God has provided you with the resources and with the things to be able to be out there. And I think that's so good. I don't think about that. Sometimes I think about that occasionally, but not always. And so I like that it's like, hey, like there were things that had to be provided for me to even be here. And so, yeah, that's a really good perspective. I love that. Thank you for sharing.
No problem.
So, can you share a story with us about a way in which maybe God has specifically spoken to you or revealed himself to you through the outdoors?
Yes. So I think it was 2 years ago. I kind of stepped out really out of my comfort zone to run a 50K. There was a lady I hiked with. She ran it, and she kind of just motivated me. She's like, "If I can do it, you can do it." So anyway, I did it. I started training for the 50K my way. The way I feel, didn't look up, didn't do anything. Kind of got a little bit of insight from people here and there, but didn't get like an actual game plan. So when we get to, I have a buddy of mine who's older, and he's kind of guiding me, coaching me through a training with me. He's, I think, 65, but he's in really good shape, and he's a health nut. He just takes care of his body. We will go have Mexican food. He will not touch the tortilla chips. He's like, nope, that oil, I'm not putting that in my body, type thing. So just to give you a little perspective on him. So anyway, he tells me you gotta have these like gels, you gotta have these like electrolytes. At that point in my life, I'm like, no, I like water. I don't like electrolytes. Never liked them. The gels I'm not big on. The goos are too sweet. So it's like, no, 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 I'm gonna do it my way. So we get to the 50K. They surprise us with, oh, by the way, it's going to be a 55K, not a 50K. So you have an extra 3 miles. And so when I get through the race, I'm doing things my way until God starts kind of shaking me a bit and saying, son, I gave you that angel along, like all along to train you and tell you what, because he's a friend from church too. So, and he has a lot of wisdom, and I listened to what he says, but I just didn't think it was important to apply it. But when you're in dire need and you're in a 50K and you're 18 miles in and you have to do 34, it turned out to be a 55K, then you have to kind of, okay, I was broken down, and I started taking all the other stuff that he was recommending. And I started thinking of, you got to take this every hour. You got to do this every, maybe this every twice a mile type of thing. And so all that started coming back to me. And I feel like God was so present, like, kind of like, hey, see what happens when you listen. And yeah, I started having this like pain in the outside of my knee, and I didn't give up. I kept walking. I couldn't run. And then the last 3 miles, just as Randy told me, he said, you're going to feel this burst of energy in the last 2 or 3 miles, and you're going to finish running. I'm telling you. And I said, I told myself, there's no way. I was getting passed up by everybody, but I wasn't going to give up. I knew God was with me. We're going to finish this out, even if I'm crawling over that finish line. Sure enough, we get to that last tee, that last aid station, and I knew where the parking lot was, and I got a burst of energy, and I was running like a 7.5 minute mile at that point, and I couldn't believe it, and all I could think was, that's God, and that's Randy, me listening to Randy through, God through Randy. And so that was when I had to dig very deep in that race and finished it. And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I am over here giggling just because I, one, just can't even imagine running a 55K. That sounds, my listeners know I am not a runner and I do not enjoy that. And so I'm just over here like, oh, yeah, that sounds fun. That. But I think that, oh man, I feel like so many little lessons zipped up in that of, I feel like so often we're given the knowledge that we need in certain scenarios. We're just too prideful to listen to them sometimes. Like, we put ourselves in these situations where we've never been before. You hadn't run a 55K before, and yet, someone was coaching you and you're like, yeah, I don't think I need to do that. And it's like, no, like, someone has been there before you. This is why we need older and wiser people. They have been there before us. But I have this conversation all the time with my parents because they're like, so do you know what we meant now whenever we told you, so on and so forth. And I'm like, yep, I get it now, even though I thought you were full of crap, and just thought that you were trying to withhold something from me, or, whatever the case may be. And it's like, no, like chances are, they know a little something, something. But I think it's really cool that God like reminded you of that. And it was like, you had the knowledge and you had the information, but you had to, implement it. And he was kind enough to remind you like, hey, this is what you need right now. And you should probably do it, even though you don't want to do it.
Yep.
Oh, so I know that you live in Bakersfield, and I feel like this is going to be an unfair question because it sounds like every chance you get, you leave Bakersfield. But for the days that you are there, what are some practical ways that you connect with God through his creation on an everyday basis without having to be out on these, super big adventures?
Well, I think you can connect even with God and with the outdoors, even in your backyard. Like this weekend, I was home and I just went in the backyard and I was chilling like in my little deck. And then I realized, man, it's so nice and sunny in between my two little trees. So I just went out there and just read a book and connected, grounded with my grass. But when I have a little bit more time, if I want to get a little bit further out, I'll ride my bike to a local park and just lay out a little tower, just a little have like a little picnic type of thing, but just lay down, read a book, and really take off my shirt and just really, really get some vitamin D and enjoy the day until I take a nap. And then when I wake up, I'm a little hungry, go back home, eat. But if I want to connect, even extend it a little bit further, there's a lot of hikes out here. There's some beautiful areas. Like the Panorama Bluffs has a little area in there. Right, they all surround the Kern River. That Kern River is pretty beautiful, and you have the Kern Canyon, which also has a lot of trails that haven't even been explored. Like most people in Bakersfield don't even go out there. So yeah, that's kind of what I do when I'm in Bakersfield.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes it's as simple as just feeling some sun and getting in your feet in the grass and being in your backyard. And those are super special moments too. So, switching gears a little bit into the title of this podcast, My Valley, His Victory, would love for you, Diego, to share a valley or a season of wilderness that you experienced and maybe just what God taught you or prepared you for in that season.
Okay, so I think the most relevant one was just that vicious cycle that I was going through late 20s and I would say early 30s, where it was just a lot of just debauchery, just going out drinking, seeking, trying to find women and just for the wrong reasons. And it was just, I found myself so empty and I was driving a nice car. I had a job and I had a little bit of money, and not that like you're ever going to have that much money being a teacher, but I, I just found myself so alone and so, and out in the midst of parties and driving home or whatever. And I just found myself laying in bed empty. And so I think when I started digging deep as to, who do I want to be like? Who do I want to grow old like? And it just all, just pointed towards my grandmas and my grandmas. And I said, well, what did they do that I'm not doing? And then I remember that devotion. I remember that peace. I remember them reading the Bible every single day, multiple times a day. And I said, you know what? So I started writing a little bit, and I came across something where it was like write 50 things every day that you're grateful for, and that was like in 2016 ish. And so I remember doing that, and since then, I've kind of gotten more consistent with writing, and now I write every morning. I do a devotional every morning, and I read the Bible every morning, and I write and reflect on what do I think the Bible is telling me every morning. But I hit like I think I hit rock bottom where I remember crying. I went to Colombia one time, and I remember sitting on the floor. We were drunk, my cousin and I, because people in Colombia like to drink, and I remember crying and telling him like I want to change my ways. Tell my cousin I really want to change my ways. I want to quit drinking so much. I want to quit doing all this stuff. And we were kind of crying together in the midst of like the drunkenness, but it was so real that I think it was one of those times where I think it was the beginning of something new for me.
Yeah. So kind of, talk to us a little bit about, I know that you said that you were raised Catholic and you kind of, it sounds like you lived your life a little bit on the worldly side and definitely was, kind of sold out on the world at that point in your life. What was the, turn towards Christianity and like why not go back to the Catholic Church? Like why and what kind of happened in that season as you came to like change your life?
So a couple things. As I was practicing Catholicism, I'd go to church, and it was more of like a you go to church and that was it. There was no like day-to-day connection, application. There was a priest that I came across here in Bakersfield that was really good, but the days that he wasn't there, it was like I didn't get anything out of church. And it was when with an ex-girlfriend of mine that she actually had never been to church, never raised like she had been to church a couple times, but her dad encouraged their family like we're not gonna like make you do any religion, nothing like that. So I told her from the get go, I said, look, I like to go to church. I go to this church this day. I'm going to ask you every weekend. But if you want to date me, like I would like for you to eventually go to church with me. And so she showed up one day and said, oh, I'm here. Are you here already? I said, no. So anyway, she starts asking me all these questions about like, why do you have to shake hands? Why do you have to repeat this? Why do you have to do this? And I started thinking to myself, I don't know. Like mom never explained that to me. I've been doing this my entire life. So fast forward, that was around 2016. Fast forward to 2020. 2020 happens, COVID happens, all the churches shut down. And so then what ends up happening is I come across on a Facebook feed this random person. It was a pastor who I felt like I had this connection to, but I'd never been connected to. And so I watch his sermon and I'm like, this is really good. And so since then, I started going to a Christian church. And that was the beginning of me actually understanding, me actually being able to implement it and a sense of community within the church. I tried to get connected multiple times through that Catholic church, and I felt like I just got to go around. I tried to go to like a men's group, and I just felt it was like a bunch of older men that knew each other like their entire lives. And I was about 25, 28 at that time, and I never really was welcomed in. And so I never felt part of anything. And going here to this other church, I everybody was so welcoming. I got into a men's group, and they're still my friends. Some of them don't even go to church anymore, and they're my boys, and we grow together. And when they have Bible study, they invite me, and I got a completely different vibe, and it was amazing. It's what I'd been wanting the entire time, and then I started building this. That's when I started like truly, I feel like walking with God, and I feel like when you walk with God and you are proud of it, then you start attracting other people that walk with God. Whereas before, happy hour and drinking was a part of my life. So it's like, oh, well, I'm going to attract people that are going to invite me to happy hour and to drinking. Well, I can go and hang out at a brewery with some friends that have a couple beers. I'm not necessarily drinking. And so I think that's when it really, I got close to God and started, sacrificing things that I'd been doing. And I've noticed so many doors and so many things happen that I said, why would I ever want to go back to what I had, to what I was doing? I don't. And so, yeah, I'm not perfect. And I obviously, we fall and we get back up and we keep, we repent and we go to him and ask for forgiveness and move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that there was, this girl that came into your life that came with you and, she started asking questions. And I think that this is like a pivotal thing for all of us to do, regardless of what type of, denomination or where you fall, is she started asking you questions of like why you do certain things. And I think that's where like we really have to have the understanding and we really have to, kind of know, or else you're really just following in line, but you don't have this understanding, right? So it's one thing I feel like in religion to just like, oh yeah, I go to church and I follow this thing and it, but you don't really fully understand it. You know, maybe understand the really big things, which are great, and that's obviously where we all start. But I think there's a lot that can happen when we truly start to dig into the why of certain things and challenge, you know, some of the things like, hey, can you show me where this comes from? Can you show me where this tradition comes from? Can you show me where that is in the Bible, like where you see that in scripture? Because I think so often we can hold certain things, you know, like what type of music, you know, a church plays, or how they do communion, or, you know, whatever the case may be, as like these really big pivotal things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, which both of those things are major things. We do need to worship and we do need to do communion, right? But it's like, if we're nitpicking over the way in which we're doing this, like, you're missing the bigger picture here. Now, if it's totally unbiblical, that's a whole nother story. But, you know, I think it's so good for us to understand and to be able to like know where that is in scripture, understand why we're doing it, understand why, you know, maybe even why Jesus put it in the Bible, you know, like where did it come from? What was going on? You know, so on and so forth. And so I think that that's really cool that you got to, you know, and it sounds like you started to deconstruct some of that Catholicism a little bit of like, I don't know why, and I don't know what. And I think there's good things that happen there when you dive deeper and you start to, you know, truly understand. Because I think once you truly understand, you know, like you did, you can start to live out your faith differently because you have a deeper understanding, right? So I also love what you said about, you know, whenever you were, you know, going to drinking and going to happy hour, you were attracting people who wanted to go and drink and do happy hour. And whenever you started following the Lord, like you started attracting those kinds of people. And I think that, man, there's so much in that. Like we do attract, you know, the things in which we reflect, which is, you know, is a true, I think, picture of like what we're doing. And so like, if you're attracting all of this bad stuff, it's like, what vibe am I putting out into the world? Like maybe I need to reflect on myself and, you know, check some of my habits, because I think that's so true. Like you are attracting what you are projecting. And so there's a lot of good in that. I would love for you to share with us just a little bit about, you know, your, you know, kind of like what you have experienced in this new season, following the Lord, being on fire for the Lord, because I think, you know, you said you were doing all the worldly things. You kind of had, you know, had it all together in the world's perspective, but yet you were so empty on the inside and you were just looking for, you know, something else. And so like, what has changed since following the Lord? And, you know, maybe like, what have you lost that seems to the world like a bad thing, but like, what have you gained through that process?
Oh, so much that I've gained. Well, we'll start with this. I think God works in such mysterious ways that while my mom was praying for me to stop doing all that I was doing, it would eventually loop around for me to be able to share my new experience walking with the Lord with her, and gave her an open mind. I think her and my dad on the divided, what the world considers, you know, different religions. So at first she started like, oh, you're going to a different church, like kind of like hating on it. And then when she was visiting, I told her, you know, like I wake up every morning and I read a passage of the Bible. You could do that too. Your grandma used to do that. So I gifted her a Bible in Spanish, and I was checking in with her and we were reading the Bible simultaneously, which was, I never thought would happen. And I think I stopped being frustrated and more gave it to God. And then eventually I'm noticing a lot of changes. That's been one. Second, talking about the people you attract. I love to travel and I love to serve. And so all of a sudden I find myself meeting people that are inviting me on missionary, like these missions. And so now I got connected with going to Ensenada, Mexico to build homes twice a year. And my friend whose husband works at this other church, he was waiting for me to commit to this so we could invite students. So now we're taking students down there and they're seeing what it's like, what people live, in what conditions people live. And we get to see a completely different side of these kids when we take them down there. Last summer and the summer before, I got to go to Rwanda and be a part of something beautiful out there at two schools. Coach the kids, a little bit with soccer and do other stuff. But I got to explore Africa and got to see a little bit of that. And so those doors, I don't think would have opened if I was still doing happy hour and doing what I was doing before. So I think those are just two really good examples how it's working within my family and also within my travels.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so special that kind of got to break down this barrier between you and your mom, between these, they're not competing religions. Like they're 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 somewhat the same thing. This isn't a podcast on the differences between Catholicism and
Right.
Christianity, but there's a lot of the same. There's a little bit of difference, and there's things that are for sure different, but for a good majority of it, it's the same. And so, it's like, what do we agree on here? Let's not necessarily look at the differences. Let's look at what we agree on. And, I just love that you got to gift her a Bible and kind of got her back into, I'm going to say back. I don't know what her relationship is like, but got her reading scripture every day and just got her in those rhythms, and that you guys got to do that together. I think that is super special. And I just know that has to have been a blessing for you to be able to, walk alongside her in that journey. And then, just these trips and kind of the opportunities that have came from this. I think that that's so cool and such an awesome experience, and something that you'll never forget. And it sounds like, really what has happened is you have a little bit more purpose now, and you are getting to live out, a life that I feel like God has called you to. And so I would love for you to just share maybe a little bit about that, and like what piece of word of encouragement or advice you would give to someone who's maybe like seeking purpose in their life, because it sounds like that was really what was missing for you in that season. And just talk to us a little bit about that.
I think the first thing is, it's funny you say that. I was just talking to one of my old kids soccer players. I ran into him at a run club, and he said he was kind of just in a funk. And I said, you know what, maybe God's asking you to come back. He was raised Catholic. And I didn't say anything about, I'm trying to bring you to my church. I didn't say anything in regard to my religion or whatever I do is better than yours. I said, just go back to church, man. Just go back to church, talk to God. But what I would highly encourage him, which is kind of like is to connect with God every day and start small. So it might be you're reading a verse. It might be you're reading a chapter. It might be you're reading a page, whatever you're comfortable with. It might be you're reading and writing. It might be you have a devotional plan that you're following. But those little baby steps are going to eventually get you back on that purpose. And without those little steps toward God, you're not going to get back to it. So it's just one little step at a time, and you're gonna notice eventually walking with him closer to him.
Yeah, absolutely. Start small, whatever you can do. And sometimes it's as simple as just going back to church and going back to some of those things that we know that we need, reading scripture,
Yep.
praying, whatever that looks like. And so, yeah, that's very helpful. Just get back into those healthy rhythms, and God will do the rest.
Amen.
So, Diego, as we wrap up, is there anything that you just want to like leave the listeners with, or anything else you would like to share with them?
Once you start getting connected with God, he allows you to feel that confidence that allows you to get outside your comfort zone, whether that be hiking a new trail, whether that be visiting a new country. This world is too immense. It's too big for you to spend the same days doing the same things, and just find what it is that you like. And get back to that inner child of yours to dig deep. What made you happy when you were a kid? It's something that we lose. And I find myself like climbing rocks and on a mountain getting dirty. And that's what I like. That's what I loved when I was little. And that freedom to be out there, even though a lot of people consider it dangerous, feeling safe and feeling like God's got my back out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like too, just to piggyback off that, like once we kind of start to get back to those childlike things that we really loved and we start to get out there and explore and do some of those things, we also begin to kind of bring back some of that childlike wonder, which, I think is so biblical in that we need, because I think so often in our adult brains, we can overthink things, we can make exceptions for things, we can, all of the things. But I think sometimes even just getting out there and acting like a child also helps us come back to that like childlike wonder that we need. And so I think that's so good. I really appreciate you being here, Diego. I really appreciate you sharing your story and just walking us through a little season of your life of, kind of living for the world and then taking that, flipping it upside down and, living your life for the Lord. And so I just thank you so much for sharing. And I would love for you to just share with the listeners where they can connect with you, and where they can, learn more about you.
Yeah, no, Instagram, Diego_ventures. I kind of document my travels, my hikes, things like that. Anything that's inspirational that I find, I usually share. And then if you want to follow our hiking group, it's _out add ADV plus _ And then, that's how you can connect with me or with our hiking group if you're interested in hiking in the Central or Southern California area.
Yeah, absolutely. And our listeners should be a little bit familiar with Outdoor Adventures Plus because of Jonathan Flores, who was on a couple weeks ago. And so if you guys haven't listened to that episode, definitely go back and listen to the other side of Outdoor Adventures Plus with Jonathan Flores. But again, thank you so much, Diego, for being here and for just sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much, Mackenzie, for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening to this week's episode of My Valley, His Victory. If you or someone you know are interested in being on this podcast, please email myvalleyhisvictory@gmail.com.